This follows from my earlier lesson on how to recognise and, if you're so inclined, to generate the imperfect tense in Latin, and it covers some of the uses of the imperfect tense. To remind you of how the imperfect tense appears, here it is again. Here is a table of the 5 main groups that I've so far been using. You will see that its most distinctive part is the BA between the connecting vowel and the personal ending. It is very regular, it is very easy to spot. Let us now look at some of the uses. The imperfect tense is used to describe a continuous or an habitual action in the past. It is different from what in Latin is called the perfect tense, which describes a single completed action in the past. To show how it works, take these sentences in English. I was walking home. This is not something that I did in an immediate flash. It's something that happened over several minutes, or perhaps hours, or even days. I was walking home, and I am no longer walking home. The action took place for a while in the past, and is now finished. I used to like chocolate. This is something that is no longer the case. I don't like chocolate anymore, but I did like it in the past. And I didn't like it on one occasion. I didn't eat a square of chocolate, think, this is lovely, and then stop thinking that. It seems that I enjoyed eating chocolate over a period. The implication here is that I enjoyed chocolate for several years, perhaps. I used to like chocolate. It happened for a while, and it is no longer the case. I kept looking out of the window. This is again something that I'm not doing at the moment. I've stopped doing it. It's something that happened a while ago. It happened more than once, or perhaps I was looking out of the window continuously for a while. I kept looking out of the window. Not a single glance out of the window, and then returning my gaze to my book or whatever. I kept looking out of the window. I lived in London for 10 years. This is what it says. It is something that I did for a specific period. I did it during a specific period, which is now ended. I no longer live in London, but I did live in London for 10 years. And notice that the form of the verb, I lived, looks like simple past, but the clear implication of the sentence is that I was living in London. It is something that I did for a period. I owed Richard £10. Again, the form of the verb does not indicate imperfect. It indicates simple past. But my act of owing £10 to Richard is something that clearly continued for a while. It may be that I owed him £10 for half an hour, or 2 days, or 3 years. It is a continuous action in the past. And because I owed him £10, that has now come to an end. I've paid it back, or perhaps Richard, being rather a nice person, has let me off the debt. I went to York University. I didn't go there and come back. I went there, and on and off, I stayed there for 3 years. Another continuous action in the past, now sadly completed. These sentences all appear in English to be in various tenses, but they all have in common that they describe actions that were not single, definite events, not things that took place in a single flash of time, but things that happened over a period. Although English can, let us admit, be eccentric in its use of tenses, these are all in the imperfect tense. As I've said more than once, the imperfect tense in Latin is much more regular than it is in English. Sum has the irregular forms in the imperfect, eram, eras, erat, etc. Apart from that, other verbs are uniformly identified by the tense marker BA. Therefore, amarbam, I was loving. Notice how I translated the above amarbam as I was loving. This is a default translation. It is a safe translation. If you are preparing for something like the GCSE examination in England, this is how you should normally translate an imperfect tense. I was doing something. This being said, if you take yourself back to the examples of the imperfect tense in English that I've just given, you can see that there are many possible forms in English into which you can translate a Latin imperfect verb. If you want a more accurate translation of amarbam, you need to ask yourself what an author would have said had he been writing in English. Let us look at some examples of the imperfect tense in Latin, and let us give some possible translations into English. Cornelia erat puella Romana. And this and many other sentences I've taken from the much loved and indeed the entirely excellent Ecce Romani course. Cornelia erat puella Romana. You could, I suppose, translate this as Cornelia was being a Roman girl, but that doesn't work in English. You translate it as Cornelia was a Roman girl, and the plain implication of that is that she was a Roman girl for a while. Let's take something a little more complex. Davus vilicus fiebat. Davus became the overseer. This doesn't describe a single completed act. It took Davus quite a while to become the overseer on the farm. For that purpose we use an imperfect. Geta in arbre dormiebat. In English, you would translate that as Geta slept in the tree. But again, the clear implication is that he was sleeping in the tree for a while. The Latin doesn't say obdormivit. Geta fell asleep in the tree. No, Geta was sleeping in the tree. Geta slept in the tree, but he was sleeping in the tree for a while. Marcus pedevexabat Corneliam. I think a good translation of this would be Marcus kept kicking Cornelia. Translating it literally, Marcus was annoying Cornelia with his foot. That is a safe translation, but it's not a very good one. You look at what the author is saying and you ask, what would he have said had he been writing in English? Obviously, Marcus kept kicking Cornelia. He annoyed her with his foot more than once. Pueri Romani, Marcus et Sextus non laborabant. You translate this as, supply the words, because they were. Because they were Roman boys, Marcus and Sextus did not work. The English translation I've given uses did, which is simple past, but once again the clear implication is that this describes something that happened over an extended period. Because they were Roman boys and because they were in the higher classes, they never did any manual work. Not only did Marcus and Sextus not work on the day when this story is set, but they did not do any manual work the day before, the day after, or the day after that. An imperfect tense. Cornelii per viam Appiam iter faciebant. The Cornelius family was travelling along the Appian Way. There we do translate a ba into a was doing something in English, because that works. They were travelling along the Appian Way, and they expected the journey to take 3 days. This one's a little harder. Necessa erat ad Calponam ire. It was necessary to go to an inn. It was not an immediate necessity that came on a few seconds or a few minutes before and then passed off. This was a continuing necessity. If you've read Ecce Romani 1, their carriage has overturned in a ditch. They are on the Appian Way. It's getting dark. All sorts of unpleasant people come out at night on Roman roads. And so it was not only a pressing but a continuing necessity that they should get themselves to an inn, therefore an imperfect tense. Here's a sentence I've adapted from Velleius Paterculus. Equites sulpicium necaverunt, tum marium petebant. The horsemen killed Sulpicius, and that's in the perfect tense. They killed him, an immediate act, cut his head off, stuck on a pole, that sort of thing. And then it isn't that they were looking for Marius, they began to look for Marius. You would best, I think, translate that petebant as a continuous tense with a beginning. They began to look for Marius. So here's a question. How do we know these meanings? The answer: we infer them from the context, either of the sentence itself or of the wider passage. To explain further, see this in English. I stole to survive. Is this imperfect or is it simple past? The answer is it can be either. It depends on the context of the sentence in which these words are found. Look at this. I looked at the pie. I was hungry. The security camera was off. I stole to survive. I stole to survive here is simple past. It is a single, unrepeated action that took place at once. Look, however, at this sentence. During the 10 months I spent living on the street in London, I stole to survive. And this, if you look at the overall context of the sentence, is an imperfect tense. I stole to survive. I was living in the street. I was a street beggar, a street person. And in order to survive, I didn't steal once. I didn't steal a meat pie in January and then make it last until November. No, I may have stolen every day. I may have stolen several times a day. I stole to survive over an extended period. Therefore, stole here is an imperfect tense. From this, I hope we can see that although recognising an imperfect tense in Latin, it is very simple. You look for the BA between the connecting vowel and the personal ending. Working out what it means in English is often a matter of judgment. You sometimes need to look at these sentences more than one and ask yourself, what is the writer trying to say with this imperfect tense? And so when it comes to working out what kind of continuous action in the past a Latin imperfect describes, when grammar is ambiguous, context is everything. It is a safe option to translate a Latin imperfect into English as I was doing something. But a much more accurate translation requires you to interrogate an imperfect verb. It requires you to look at the overall context in which that imperfect is found, and then to make your own judgment. Thank you for listening to this lesson.